Let's dive right into energy. Let's dive right into energy security and affordability during war and peace. And I'm going to start by noting that, like many regions of the world, New Hampshire is completely devoid of fossil fuels, forcing the Granite State to import 100% of oil, gas, and gasoline at a cost of about 3.5 billion per year and rising. And the more we rely on imports, the more exposed we are to price volatility caused by LNG exports and data centers, and the more vulnerable we are to fragile fossil fuel supply chains being weakened by wars in Iran and Ukraine. When we launched Revision Energy 23 years ago, cost-effective alternatives to the fossil fuel monopoly didn't exist. Solar electric systems were extremely expensive, heat pumps were not reliable at cold temperatures, and electric vehicles couldn't compete with internal combustion engines. But an electrotech revolution over the past decade has drastically changed the global energy landscape. An explosion of solar panel manufacturing capacity has made solar electricity the cheapest form of power in history. And technology advancements have made heat pumps hyper efficient and reliable down to minus 10 degrees Fahrenheit. And electric transportation has evolved to become cheaper, cleaner, and better than any gas or diesel powered vehicle. This is why companies like Bellavance Beverage are investing in clean technology to reduce costs and protect themselves against the extreme volatility of imported liquid fuels and the skyrocketing cost of utility rates. When we installed Bellavance's rooftop solar array in 2020, the average New Hampshire commercial utility rate was 16 cents per kilowatt hour. Today, the average rate is 23 cents per kilowatt hour, a 37% increase in 6 years. When we calculated Bellavance's return on investment in 2020, the project delivered a 10% internal rate of return, a 7-year payback, and expected utility savings of $2.1 million over the 25-year warranty life of the solar panels. But as utility rates continue to go up, those returns to Bellavance are improving proportionally, which is one of the major reasons we are fortunate to see so many repeat clients. Take a second to notice the yellow circle around some of Bellavance's diesel trucks. In 2020, the average price for diesel was below $3 per gallon, while today it's hovering around $5.70 per gallon. And that cost increase is probably gobbling most, if not all, of the savings from the rooftop solar. And you wouldn't be alone if you think that Bellavance is stuck with this problem, which is somewhat true in an America beholden to a fossil fuel industry and a federal administration trying to annihilate electrotech. But in much of the rest of the world, societies and businesses are doing everything possible to throw off the chains of finite polluting fossil fuels. In Australia, trucking companies like Centurion have discovered it's cheaper to switch to electric technology that is more reliable and lower maintenance than diesel rigs. And when the truck's fuel is electricity generated by wind, solar, and hydro, the cost per mile to operate is less than half of internal combustion. And here's a key fact. Australians are doing this despite having significant underground reserves of oil and gas, unlike New England, and because they know the future belongs to nations that can achieve true energy independence and security without combustion. Electrotech is revolutionizing transportation in ways that were unimaginable just a decade ago. Fortescue, one of the world's largest mining companies, recently ordered 360 of these 100% electric dump trucks, which are expected to save the company $400 million per year in diesel fuel costs. And by the way, those savings were calculated before the Iran war started. And although mining is one of the most energy intensive activities on Earth, Fortescue is on schedule to achieve net zero operations by 2030. Protecting the environment is a core value at Fortescue, but they are also following the money. And because the amounts are so vast, the money is not hard to follow. In 2025, global energy transition investments of 2.3 trillion will more than double the investments in fossil fuels, continuing a 6-year downward trend for coal, oil, and gas investments. The new Joule order is a recently coined phrase to describe the colossal amount of capital flowing into the electrotech revolution and away from traditional energy sources. But not from an environmental standpoint. The new Joule order is describing these capital flows happening now more as a result of energy security than as a result of climate damage. And that's a pretty critical point here as we look at what's happening in America. Cumulatively, those clean energy investments are leading to records being smashed around the world. Please forgive me for this busy slide, but I hope we all remember Sunday, May 3rd, 2026, as the first time in history that solar supplied more electricity to the entire US utility grid than natural gas. It was only for an hour, but we had solar generating 103 gigawatts compared to 99 gigawatts from gas. This was, we could not have dreamed of this when we started Revision Energy. But there's another kind of dynamic here that's really important and true that needs to be pointed out, which is the fact that solar and wind and other renewables can be intermittent, particularly the sun. And we see that through the graph at the top, solar ramps up during the day and then completely disappears at night. Thankfully, Electrotech has a solution to this problem called battery storage. Batteries combined with solar are breaking records almost every day in California, which has become the fourth largest economy on Earth. Again, on Sunday, May 3rd of 2026, wind, hydro, and solar power combined to produce more than 150% of California's electricity demand for more than 9 hours of the day and 79% of the 24-hour demand. Just, again, unimaginable outcomes that we didn't foresee a decade or two ago. Since 2023, California has reduced its natural gas consumption by 61% and increased its battery storage capacity by 325%, illustrating the extraordinary speed and impact of this electrotech revolution. And notice that the data is coming from the Financial Times, not like Audubon. Although we are years behind California here in northern New England, battery storage is finally starting to come into our region with the 175 megawatt Crosstown Energy Storage Project in Gorham, Maine. In this array, this storage facility, just to give you a sense of the scale, it can power about 19,000 homes for a few hours. And they've strategically located it next to one of Southern Maine's most congested substations called the Mosher substation. Crosstown is designed to simultaneously alleviate the grid bottleneck while avoiding the need for costly transmission infrastructure in this already congested area. The dispatchable battery system will earn revenue by reducing peak load demand on the regional grid and serving as a shock absorber when electricity demand spikes or when intermittent renewables suddenly drop. Smaller scale battery storage projects are being built in New Hampshire, like this 14 megawatt facility in Berlin, which is located next to a dam so that it can be charged with cheap local hydroelectricity and then dispatched to the grid during times of peak demand to lower ratepayers' costs. It's tiny compared to Crosstown due to the Granite State's long-term failure to create policies and incentives in favor of renewable energy and storage. But it would be irresponsible to ignore the reality that electrotech has its own risks and challenges. For example, the metals and other raw materials in lithium-ion batteries. Mining for cobalt in Africa, for example, has been associated with human rights abuses and environmental damage. But next generation sodium-ion batteries are already helping to solve this problem, along with the fact that modern batteries are more than 95% recyclable. They're starting to achieve up to 98% recycling of all the raw materials in these newer batteries. This means that a battery can be reincarnated almost an infinite number of times. In Norway, where 98% of vehicles sold in 2026 so far are electric, battery recycling companies like Hydrovolt are powering their operations with renewable energy to create a circular electrotech economy that is clean and will eventually mine 100% of raw materials for new batteries from end-of-life batteries. And from a raw materials cost standpoint, single-use fossil fuels don't stand a chance against recyclable, fully circular electrotech. This slide from energy research firm Ember is showing us the total amount of mining required annually for fossil fuels on the right, compared to the amount of mining required for the entire global clean energy transition over the next 25 years on the left. And that little tiny box in the middle is the annual harvest of energy transition materials over the next 20 per year over the next 25 years. And that's roughly how long they estimate it will take us to get all the materials that we need to completely replace fossil fuel energy. And here in the United States, Redwood Materials is one of the leading recyclers of end-of-life solar panels and batteries. And at their Reno, Nevada facility, they have partnered with this company called Crusoe to create a prototype sustainable data center model powered by renewable energy and battery storage. Here in the image, you can see Crusoe's small data center over on the left-hand side of the image. Front center is a large solar array that's delivering power. And then in the back, because those little white things are too hard to see, I've blown them up to illustrate that those are used electric vehicle batteries that still have plenty of life in them, although they're no longer viable for a car. And those are being used to back up the solar power when the sun goes down or clouds are occluding the sun. And so when those used EV batteries actually reach true end of life and the solar panels reach end of life, they'll be brought over to the Redwood Materials facility on the right to be reincarnated into a next generation of clean electrotech for us to use. And so, we're seeing this stuff evolve at a scale and a speed that nobody really expected. And when we think about the economic and environmental advantages of the electrotech revolution, we really got to step back and kind of zoom out for a second to look at what energy sources are available to us and whether or not we actually have enough in the long term to move away from what has traditionally powered us. And so this is the work of an international energy researcher named Dr. Richard Perez. He's been doing this for about 40 years out of the University System of New York. And what his slide is expressing is the relative abundance of known energy sources to humankind. Your reference point is the little blue marble down at lower left, which is meant to volumetrically illustrate all the energy needed globally on an annual basis. And then all of the other spheres are sized in relation to their ability to meet that global demand. So you can see on the finite side of the ledger, we have plenty of gas, oil, and coal and uranium for now. And then on the infinite renewable side of the ledger, you basically have two spheres that are big enough, the wind sphere to meet global demand. But then there's the ridiculously oversized sun in the middle. And this is why, here are the takeaways from this slide. Volumetrically, it's critical to understand that in 1 hour, the sun is putting enough energy on the surface of the earth to power all global energy demand for an entire year. It's almost an incomprehensible amount of energy coming from 93 million miles away. And then if you kind of repackage that volume, it's interesting to note that 5 days of sunshine contain as much energy that exists in the known reserves of fossil fuels remaining in Earth's crust today. And so this is how I kind of help people get their minds around the fact that we actually do have enough renewable energy to tap to move away from those fossil fuels. Now let's zoom in on our neck of the woods. So we're just coming through a cold winter. It's starting to turn into a nice spring here in New England. And it might not be top of mind for everyone that our latitude in this region is identical to famously sunny places like the north of Spain and the south of France. In fact, the solar array on Bellevance's roof in Hooksett is identical to the latitude of Monaco on the French Riviera. But a crucial difference between our two regions is that they enjoy a year-round balmy climate on the Mediterranean, whereas over in New England, we have really strong Gulf Stream winds that pull Arctic temperatures down through our region to give us, cold winters. But there's a silver lining in this and this temperature differential, which is the fact that solar panels are much more efficient the lower the temperature is outdoors. And so when it's 20, 40, 50, 60, 70 degrees in New England, we're getting a much higher yield from a solar array than you would in really hot places. And I want you to notice on this slide that I've circled Germany to illustrate how much further north they are than us. Um, and that's for a couple reasons. One reason is to note that because we're at a more southerly latitude, we get about 30% more sunshine per year than Germany. Yet they are decades ahead of us in their clean energy transition. For example, in 2025, for the first time in history, solar and wind generated more than half of all the electricity on the German grid for the entire year. Solar and wind generated 55%, while fossil fuels generated 45%. And that's just a drastic change. And one of the geopolitical reasons behind this is that for the past 40 years, Germany has been frantically trying to wean itself off gas and oil because they've had to rely on Russia for those fossil fuels. And they knew that eventually that could be under threat. And sure enough, as soon as Russia invaded Ukraine, they also basically shut off fossil fuel supplies to Western Europe. And so it's been to Germany's advantage that they have been planning for a day like this, and they continue to double down on electrotech to secure long-term energy security and affordability. But going back to northern New England and helping people understand why we were able to demonstrate a really strong economic and environmental return on a solar investment, I want to just kind of highlight what this map is telling us. This is from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, and what it's expressing is the expected yield from a solar array anywhere in the United States. And so it's always kind of fun to point out that the solar array on Bellevance's rooftop is yielding roughly the same amount of solar electricity per year as a solar array in Houston, Texas. That's for two reasons. That's because we're at a good solar resource latitude, and also, again, because there's a heat and humidity penalty for places like Texas. So when we get the chance to help people understand the viability of the solar resource in northern New England, it's no surprise to us that New Hampshire companies like Ambix Manufacturing, located in Albany, New Hampshire, have decided to cover basically every square foot of their facilities' rooftops with solar. And here's a pretty compelling reason why they did that. When we sent them the proposal for this project, it was built in 2023. When we sent the proposal in 2022, we were projecting energy savings in year one of about $30,000 in terms of avoided utility costs. You can see that the system is expected to deliver a 6-year simple payback, a 25-year internal rate of return of about 16.7%, and then 25-year net savings of about $813,000 in avoided utility costs. And we're not really shy to extend those pro forma financials out to 40 years, which we call the expected commercial lifespan of a solar panel, showing that the savings would be about 1.6 million. And the reason for our comfort with this extended kind of look at the financials is that there are 50-year-old solar arrays in New England that are still generating 80% of what they could generate on day one. So this is a very long-lived technology. It's extremely simple with no moving parts, really basic raw materials. And it's so reliable that we use it to support life when we're in outer space, which is one of the most harsh environments known to humankind. So we have a lot of confidence in the longevity and the performance of those panels. And then in this excellent financial bargain, there's also a strong economic benefit that you see in the form of 137,000 pounds of carbon dioxide being offset by the solar generated from the electricity. And so this is how, you know, this is why companies like Tri-K Manufacturing, another New Hampshire company located in Derry, has decided to move forward with rooftop solar. We just built this project last year in 2025, but when we sent the proposal, we were able to calculate that this project's going to deliver roughly. Oh, by the way, these numbers are before the Iran war, and they're probably better than they are today. But we forecasted first year energy savings of about 59,000 in avoided electricity costs, 5-year simple payback, 18% internal rate of return, 20 to 5-year savings of 1.5 million, and 40-year savings over 3 million. And of course, we love noting the 335,000 pounds of avoided carbon dioxide in the bargain. And then the other kind of data set you might want to just quickly look at is the levelized cost of energy down in the lower right. So this is basically illustrating what happens if they purchase a solar array down at the first bar graph on the left, showing they lock in an electricity rate of 3.3 cents per kilowatt hour when it's generated by the rooftop solar. And by doing nothing, they're exposed to extremely high utility rates both now and long into the future. So it's these types of return on investment, both economic and environmental, that have helped Vision Energy build more than 20,000 clean energy projects during the 23 years we've been in business. And despite the federal administration's most intense efforts to slow that down, we've actually seen the opposite begin to happen since the Iran war started in February. We've seen a notable increase in customer inquiries coming our way because people are starting to realize just how exposed we are in this fossil fuel dominant world. But what I haven't shown anyone today thus far is kind of the economics of a battery storage project in New Hampshire. Unfortunately, the reason for that is we've just been battling at the New Hampshire legislature for almost 2 decades to try to promote more encouraging policies and incentives for clean energy. Those haven't really come to fruition. But I do want to give a shout out to Eversource and to all the businesses who are in Eversource territory, because they have now launched a battery program that we think is going to have a measurable impact in terms of spurring new battery combined with solar projects in the Granite State. And so Eversource's program is called Connected Solutions, which means that the battery is not only attached to the electrical infrastructure in the business, but that battery resource is also accessible and can be controlled by Eversource from their remote control center. And basically, this program is designed to reward businesses that can help the utility kind of shave peak demand on the grid when the grid is under the greatest strain. Which is a problem that's showing up, all over New England, and unfortunately, we don't have a concerted effort to solve this problem. But these projects, over time, we think in aggregate will begin to help reduce grid congestion and help us avoid the cost of building expensive new transmission projects. Each year, the Connected Solutions event period runs from June 1 through September 30th. And each customer who participates in the program will receive a 24-hour notification in advance of when their battery might be called upon to be dispatched during peak demand and not available to run loads directly in the building itself. And down at the bottom here, we've got some very simple math showing that an average of a 40 kilowatt of load reduction multiplied by $200 per kilowatt incentive equals about $8,000 in revenue per year for Eversource customers who join the program. So we hope that is appealing to New Hampshire businesses, and we'll see how that plays out in the months and years ahead. And here's what we imagine to be the value stack adding up. You've already seen the solar electric bill savings from my previous examples, which also serve as a hedge on kilowatt hour rate increases by the utility, and they lock in a low solar electric rate per kilowatt hour. And then you combine that with the Connected Solutions program, where you get battery electric bill savings by shaving peak demand and load shifting, works out to lower peak kilowatt use, and it enables us to manage the load to pull grid power during lower cost periods and generates revenue. And so we hope that's going to result in roughly a 9-year payback for the battery component of a solar plus battery system. So we have high hopes for that program, and we hope you'll get in touch with us if you'd like to learn more about it. One of the kind of headlines about the battery storage program opportunities and the electrotech revolution in general has been the incredibly drastic reducing cost of electrotech over the last 20 years. You can see that batteries are down by more than 99%. That's also true for solar panels, and it's gradually going to become true for electric transportation because the key cost there is this battery storage. But in my mind, these cost reductions really kind of dredge up a really important question for all of us here in New England and the rest of America, which is who is going to benefit the most from what might be the biggest economic opportunity in the history of the world. When you think about the energy transition from 200 years of kind of fossil fuel reliance and infrastructure and making a complete change to electrotech, renewables combined with hyper efficient electric appliances, that's probably the biggest infrastructure project in the history of the world, which therefore becomes the greatest wealth and job creation opportunity we've ever seen. This was going pretty well in America throughout the Biden administration when they passed the CHIPS Act and the Inflation Reduction Act as a way to unleash domestic manufacturing of the most critical kind of components for the electrotech revolution, including solar panels, battery storage, and electric vehicles. And that was going pretty awesome until Donald Trump was elected in 2024. And in 2025, to nobody's surprise, President Trump basically eliminated the vast majority of all the incentives for clean tech in that Inflation Reduction Act. I will note that he left battery storage alone, but incentives for other technologies were basically yanked and are getting ready to come to a close. And so when I think about who's going to benefit the most from this drastic kind of pivot in America, I look to this nice graphic that was created by the Rocky Mountain Institute with a little embellishment by myself. And what the slide is showing us are the global superpowers over the last 220 plus years, and the kind of the innovations and technology advances that would made them the most powerful nation on the planet for the time period in which they were dominant. So you can see throughout the 1800s, colonial Great Britain was the great superpower through the eras of iron, water power, and mechanization, and steam and rail. And then in the early 1900s, you had kind of the newish America rising up on the global stage. Thomas Edison's inventing the light bulb, and we're really dominating through the age of steel, electricity, and heavy engineering. And for almost 100 plus years, we have been the dominant superpower through our approach to innovation and being also the good cop of the world. But something really kind of momentous happened in 1980, which not everyone might stop to think about, which is when President Reagan came into the White House and took over from Jimmy Carter. He literally had the solar panels pulled off of the White House. And he announced to the rest of the world that America was doubling down on coal, oil, and gas. And in doing so, he annihilated the clean energy industry that had kind of staggered to its knees after the oil embargo and kind of oil crunch of the 1970s. We were just starting to get a clean energy industry here in America, and President Reagan pulled the plug. And now that the Trump administration has similarly pulled the plug on the Inflation Reduction Act, My perspective is that as we go forward, we need to really pay attention to the fact that China now controls more than 80% of the global manufacturing capacity for wind turbines, solar panels, battery storage, and electric vehicle. And so when we think about energy security and affordability, it's actually China where that is kind of happening on the most profound level. And I think it's a risk, a long-term risk for America not to recognize this threat and reconsider our pivot away from the electrotech revolution. I'm going to pivot kind of a little bit radically myself here as I get ready to wind down the presentation part of this engagement. And I want to go back to the early days of Revision Energy. So back then, we had to draw the future that we imagined. We weren't even doing commercial solar projects 20 years ago. When we had to draw the future that we imagined, the 100% kind of electrotech or solar powered household just really was not possible. Solar panels were just extremely expensive. I already illustrated heat pumps weren't viable down to low temps. Battery storage didn't exist in electric vehicles. The first one I had back then only went 80 miles, so it was not viable. But if we fast forward to 2026 in these really kind of halcyon days of the electrotech revolution, I'm happy to report that Revision Energy and lots of our fellow companies in the renewable energy industry, we're now taking homes completely off of fossil fuels in one fell swoop by actually building what we dreamed of 20 years ago. So this house in Durham, New Hampshire, you can see it's got the solar panels on the roof, the red heat pump. The red heart shows where the heat pump ductwork is, and there you have the electric car in the driveway. And in the garage, we've got the battery storage system. So this is happening faster and faster throughout Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts, and the three states where we operate. And the biggest driver of this transition off of fossil fuels at both the residential and the commercial level are the economics. When you look at this 25-year cost of energy kind of representation, on the far left, the most expensive thing you can possibly do is sit on your hands and do nothing. But if you'd like to start saving money and maybe being more gentle on the environment and also be thinking about long-term energy security, both at the domestic and the international level, you can finance the electrotech conversion of your home and basically cut your energy bills in half and use all of the savings to finance that investment. So basically a cash flow neutral transition away from fossil fuels. And then once you achieve payback on that loan, you're basically having free energy for the next 20 plus years. And then if you want your lowest possible cost opportunity, if you want to fulfill that, then you super insulate the structure. And that results in the high performance home delivering the absolute lowest possible long-term cost for energy and the longest term energy security. And so what this means is that these new economics mean that we're now building housing developments in New England that don't have a drop of fossil fuels from day one. This is the Hillside Sustainable Living Community in Newburyport, Massachusetts. And you can see all the homes have the rooftop solar. You can't see the heat pumps, but I can assure you that they're there along with the battery storage. And then we have solar parking canopies down in the foreground showing how we can let people charge their electric vehicles with solar electricity and save a ton of money and completely eliminate all their emissions. And everything that I've shown you thus far is kind of related to more of a wartime posture because we know the Iran war and the Ukraine wars are grinding along, and hopefully we'll find a resolution soon. But I did say in my kind of headline for this presentation that we would also talk about affordability and security in times of peace. And peace can mean days like today when it's beautiful and sunny. But peacetime can also include extreme weather events, which have become more common throughout the world and certainly more common in northern New England. And so I thought it just might be inspiring for people to become aware of this really advanced community that was built in Babcock, Florida. Actually, the name of the development is called Babcock Ranch. And it's a 2,000 home community that's 100% powered by solar. It has battery storage, it has electric vehicles. The roads are designed to shed water during extreme weather events. And kind of the resilience of this community was really proven back in October of 2022 when Hurricane Ian came through and absolutely demolished the Pacific coast or the Pacific coast of Florida. Um, and when that happened, Babcock Ranch, located just 9 miles inland, didn't even have its lights flicker as a result. The internet stayed on, the lights stayed on, and they proved kind of the dramatic resilience and security that comes from distributed, clean, renewable electrotech compared to the completely vulnerable fossil fuel system that we've been subjected to and really conditioned to think of not at all in the background. We've become conditioned to this culture of fossil fuel convenience that we don't stop and think about these things. And so I hope that is kind of instructive as you look to your own business and energy future and the energy future for your own home. And so as I wrap up my comments today, I just want to finish with Revision Energy's mission, which is to make life better by building our just and equitable electric future. We think that being a 100% employee-owned company is the fullest expression of this idea of a just and equitable electric future because we want every single person or co-owner at Revision to share more equally in the success of the business. And we're not afraid to have a little fun in the bargain. You can see that as baseball season starts to come upon us, I'd like to give Citgo a little jab in the side to say, hey, you better watch out. The electrotech revolution's coming your way, and Revision Energy has a different vision of the future than you might have. So thank you so much for listening to those long-winded comments, and I would be really happy to stop sharing my screen and take a few of your questions.
Thank you. I have a number of questions, but I want to open up to the audience first. So please, if you have a question, raise your hand, come up, unmute, or put your question in chat and I'll read it. Whatever you're more comfortable with. And on Lawrence, go ahead.
Hi there. Great presentation. Thank you. I have a question about what can individual businesses with facilities really look toward doing in terms of the most effective investments. Your focus was mostly on the utility scale and residential communities, and I'm curious what individual, manufacturing settings, arenas, large buildings, do they just need to wait for the utility scale to sort of come online, or are there investments that they ought to consider for their own businesses?
So Lawrence, first of all, thank you for the kind words about the presentation. And I don't know, did you miss the rooftop solar projects that I highlighted with Ambix Manufacturing and Tri-K Industries?
No, I saw that. I guess I meant more about were those projects combining the battery storage systems with the rooftop solar?
Not yet.
I see.
Not
Okay.
yet. We hope that's going to be the next evolution. It's been an incredibly uphill battle in New Hampshire, where unfortunately, in a country where something like energy has become highly politicized and somewhat polarizing, it's unfortunate to note that New Hampshire seems to be more in tune with the federal administration's anti-renewable posture. And so it's been just incredibly difficult to get consistent policies and incentives to encourage electrotech in New Hampshire. And I can't forecast when that's going to happen. I also, need to confess that I do live in Maine, and so my finger is not quite as tightly on the pulse of the legislative happenings in New Hampshire as it is in Maine. I do have one of my colleagues here on the call. Her name
I
is
was just going to say, if Rachel, I had a question for you. If
maybe Rachel wants to jump in as
along
well.
with what we just talked about, what is the single policy lever, if moved, that would accelerate the business adoption in New Hampshire? What do you see as opportunity here?
Ooh, That's a great question. And thanks for letting me jump into the conversation. As Phil said, I'm one of his co-owners at Revision Energy. I do live in New Hampshire, coming to you from my house in Canterbury, New Hampshire, but I specifically work with commercial customers here in my home state. So schools, towns, municipalities, businesses, nonprofits, that kind of small commercial sector. And from a policy perspective, I mean, we could write a pretty long wish list, but I think where um, where we would love to see is making things a bit easier. So we've worked on streamlining permitting, things like that. That's applies to the entire solar industry, and then specifically around compensation for electricity that you produce. Large industrial customers, for example, are limited by sort of an artificial cap on how big a system they can produce. For example, we've installed the largest rooftop array here in New Hampshire, and the commercial user had a lot more usage at their site that they would love to produce with their own energy. They had a lot more roof space, and we literally stopped about halfway across due to sort of relatively arbitrary policy limitation that would have prevented them from participating in net metering over over a 1 megawatt AC size. So that's an example to me where the customer had the use case and the appetite to produce more of their energy on site. They had the physical space to do it. And that was really just a policy limitation. So things like that, I would love to see cleared the way, particularly for these large energy users who are really under pressure and looking closely at where their energy comes from. Because if you're in charge of the operating budget for a large manufacturer, you're pretty clued into where your energy comes from, and we'd love to help them with that.
Thank you. Phil, I had a question for you. You've pointed out that solar now is cited as the cheapest form of electricity. And it's interesting that you pointed out California, but also Texas is a big solar producer with very different policy approaches. What is it about businesses specifically when we pulled away the incentives from the IRA? How do you now convince or bridge the gap for that skeptical CFO who's looking at the upfront capital cost and make sense of the long-term investment as a cheapest form of electricity? It's the upfront cost somewhat is a hurdle that you have to get through.
Okay, so let me begin by saying that it's somewhat hopeful that a couple of a Democrat and a Republican in the U.S. House of Representatives have introduced a bill to reinstate the solar tax credits. And so we are cautiously optimistic that the administration or others besides, the White House, that others may be realizing that, wait a second, this drastic pivot away from clean energy might be at our extreme disadvantage. And they're probably getting comments from people from places like Texas where they've been able to really shore up the grid in the 2 years since they had a really bad wintertime storm that froze the natural gas pipes in Texas, and people actually died because they couldn't heat their homes. And it's now been calculated that they've installed so much wind and solar that would keep running through a storm like that wouldn't happen if the gas pipes froze again. And so, there are practical realities saying not only can solar and wind deliver cheaper kilowatt hours, but they can give us resilience that is not possible with fossil fuels. And so with regard to those upfront costs for solar, you got to remember in Texas, they're building the vast utility scale projects. And so they procure solar panels, sometimes from China at extremely low cost. And so that upfront cost might not be what you would pay for a smaller type project in New England. And so the numbers can still pencil as utility grid rates skyrocket and natural gas prices continue to skyrocket. Um, so, you know, every day that goes by in the 23 years I've been in business in the renewable energy space, the cost benefit analysis of solar versus fossil fuels has gotten better despite the efforts of a lot of politicians to make the renewable side not pencil any longer. What's the
Yeah.
saying? You can't kill a good idea.
Yeah, economically, it's making
Yeah.
the case for itself. Any other audience questions? I want to open up the room for the audience. I have plenty of other questions if you. So in the recent explosion of data centers and AI, and you showed that chart of China in renewables, but they're also advancing their AI and robotics. We are trying to catch up with or develop our own AI industry and be leaders in that. That's a lot of energy demands that's coming up. How does that change the equation for renewables?
Let's just start with the fact that nowhere on planet Earth do fossil fuels pay for their full freight, right? There is no cost for the immense pollution that's caused by fossil fuels. And so if we had the true cost associated with fossil fuels and they had to compete in the market with those costs in place, I think it would already kind of be game over in the sense of unleashing, you know, torrents of electrotech to meet this rising demand for AI and cloud computing. Um, and so, I'm fully confident that more data centers like the pilot project by Crusoe, I think that is going to become more and more of the norm as opposed to the ones like Elon Musk just built in Pennsylvania, where he installed four massive natural gas power plants, on-site power plants, to power the data center, causing extreme pollution in the nearby community, and basically adding to this rampant kind of climate damage that we're inflicting all over the globe. At some point, that doesn't pencil for humanity, both on the financial side and on the sustainability side. How and when we get there, I'm uncertain. But what I've seen over the past 23 years is that we continue to find the ways, the viable financial pathways to unlock the renewable energy opportunity and to scale at the pace that we need it to scale. And let's not forget, there are billions and billions and billions of dollars sloshing around in the US economy. If people who control those resources to get serious about thrusting forward the electrotech revolution, they can start becoming investors and ideally make money while unleashing electrotech to solve these huge energy problems that we're facing.
Scott, you briefly raised your hand if it was by accident, or did you have a question?
Sorry, that was by accident. But
Okay.
then,
So what's the biggest misconception you hear from New Hampshire business owners in the first meeting with them? And what is a legitimate concern that you think doesn't get enough airtime?
Rachel, I think that's a good one for you.
I think when Phil pointed out the most expensive thing to do is do nothing, but overcoming that inertia is a challenge. I think when a business owner sits down and looks at it and sort of takes away the fact that we just take paying the electric company their bill for granted, you can really look at that and say, to the slides Phil showed that showed the levelized cost of energy over 40 years, like I don't actually have to pay them all that. And that is the most expensive option, the sort of choosing to do nothing. But that requires taking action, which psychologically requires effort. So starting off conversations with that. And I think one of the challenges, my service team will thank me for pointing this out, is while solar is often considered like a set it and forget it technology, there is an element of truth to that. It's very low maintenance, no moving parts. I forget about my own solar on my roof. You are investing in a power plant at your facility, and someone should be keeping an eye on it, whether that's revision, you hire our operations maintenance team to do that, whether you dedicate someone on your facilities team. Like any piece of infrastructure, you want to be keeping an eye on it, kind of doing a systems health check and I find people regret it when they truly set it and forget it and don't have anyone keeping a proactive eye on it. So as long as you have someone internally, or again, hiring someone like revision to the O&M, I think that's often a forgotten piece of it, that I think most business owners, as long as they have a plan for keeping an eye on it, then the system's gonna do its thing for the next 40 years. Phil, anything you'd add to that?
No, I thought you covered it really well, Rachel. And I think that, business owners are extremely busy in my experience. And so it's really hard for them to devote maybe as much time and attention to what is happening in this electric tech revolution and how it relates to their business. And so it's our job to help kind of help them understand just how fast this is scaling and how much more affordable it has become over the last decade and what the opportunity looks like going forward. And I think we're getting better and better at that over time. I also think it's really important, Zaina, to to inspire people and kind of reveal things that people had no idea is happening. For example, did you know that in Burlington, Vermont, there's a company called Beta Technologies that's building the first generation of electric airplanes? Well, I was doing a little research on them, and I thought, maybe it was a startup with 20 or so people. They actually have more than 900 employees working on
Wow.
this technology. And we've already installed the first electric plane charging station for Beta over at the Portland Jetport. And there's already one at the Manchester, New Hampshire airport. And when people hear that, they're like, are you kidding me? I didn't even think electric planes would ever be possible, let alone the fact that there's a Burlington, Vermont company that has built an electric plane that has already flown the entire way across the United States and that is building out a charging network to allow their regional planes to operate in any market. I mean,
Yeah, that's
who
amazing.
knew?
It's coming. Yeah.
Yeah. So
So
if that can happen, more basic energy generation should be a no-brainer for most everybody.
So if you're a business owner, you're watching this webinar, you feel persuaded, what are 3 concrete steps you tell them to take tomorrow?
Call me. My name's Rachel. I can drop my contact info. No, I think dig out your electric bill if you haven't ever looked at it. Get a handle on that. Do reach out to companies like Revision who are expert in this. Pick our brains. I'd love to talk to any of you. I'm sure other companies would as well. That's only 2 steps.
That's
Phil,
okay.
what's number
And
3?
the policy, ask for a
Well,
better
that's true.
policy. Yeah.
Yeah. I know, again, to Phil's point, there's a lot of demands on business owners' time and a lot of policies that will help them do business here in New Hampshire. But pulling energy up to the top of that list would certainly be a helpful next step.
I want
Yeah,
to
and I
thank
would
you.
just add, Zaina, that in our 23 years in business, it's been very common for a business owner to explore the economic and environmental return on a solar investment for their home. And a lot of them go forward with that project. And then after a year or two of seeing how reliable the technology is and seeing that the financial savings estimates that we had forecasted were coming completely true, and we're conservative in our forecasts. Usually the real world results are a little bit better than what we estimate. When they see that, they ask themselves, well, if it's working this well at my house, why wouldn't it be equally, if not better or more effective at my business? And so we have a lot of business owners who did it first at the home, who then a couple of years later find themselves doing it with us at their business.
Now, I want to thank you both as we wrap up here. Really good conversation, perfect for Energy Week and for businesses to consider. And as we do this, I want to make sure that everybody knows that we're continuing the conversation at our conference on May 14th. So I invite you to attend and continue talking about renewables, sustainability, and solutions at the local level. We also have Granite Goodness live recording of a podcast, and that's going to be about doing well by doing good, which is perfect for Revision. They are doing well by doing good. So this is a wonderful topic. Thank you for sharing with us. Thank you for using energy security as your title, because we need to reclaim that for renewables. And it's great to talk with you always. Thank you. Thank you, Phil, and thank you, Rachel.
You're welcome, Zaina. Thank you very much. Have a great energy week.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Take care.